Hello, folks, and welcome back to Adobe Live. First one of the week today. Happy Monday, everyone. How's everyone doing? Stephanie, had a nice weekend? Nice.
Nice as it can be in this situation.
We're here for another session, a little hour that we spend all together on our lunch breaks. And today we're joined by Gordon Reid, founder of Middle Boop Studios. Hi, Gordon.
Hey, everyone. How are we doing?
What do you have in store for us today?
I have got a fun hour, I think, today. Well, I hope so, anyway. I'm going to talk a little bit about creative evolution, as if anyone's followed my career has known things have changed quite a lot over the years, and talk about why there's a lot of value in changing things up and continually moving forward. I'm going to talk a fair amount about the Weird World Cup project, which I believe is right now, which is a big creative collaborative project with a lot of good Adobe artists that people should know, and I believe right now, with everything going on, it's probably quite a good time to talk about creative collaboration. And
definitely. And tell everyone where you're based as well. You're based in the UK, right?
Yeah, I'm based in London, based in North London. Yeah, not far away from kind of Hampstead and Highgate and all of those sort of places. So yeah, it's lovely and sunny today.
Yeah, we were just talking about how Hampstead Heath is just packed these days and probably shouldn't be.
It definitely should not be. Yeah.
Bring everyone out.
Yeah.
So you founded Middle Boop Branding Studio. Tell us a bit more about the studio itself and anything you're going to share today. Where do you want to start?
I'll start. How about we start with my new website?
Yeah,
be a good place to start. So I think we're on here now. So basically, I started 12 years ago. I started Middle Boop 12 years ago, straight out of university. And the idea being at the time that I really wanted to create illustration and collaborate with musicians. And for a good few years, that was what I was doing. And it got to a point where I felt I could broaden my horizons slightly and learn new tricks and techniques and push myself on and move then into advertising. I kind of used my illustrative skills to get more of a creative style design role, working with advertisers, still under the guise of Middle Boop. I would go in and collaborate with different agencies. And after a little while, I moved that on to, I realized that what I really loved most was working directly with clients and helping clients build a brand or build something. So working with entrepreneurs and people that just has this amazing idea, whether it was small or large, whatever it was. I realized that was the most value I could add to a project. And with that, I grew the Middle Boop Studio as more of an agile studio with the thought process that we would work directly with clients. And if they needed us to, we could work with them in their offices, in their studios, or work from our studio and kind of mix things up like that.
So what's the story behind the name, Middle Boop?
Oh, yeah, Middle Boop.
I'm intrigued.
Okay, well, there is. So obviously I get asked that a fair amount because it's a weird name. And I've never
joined in.
Yeah, you joined in. That's cool.
That's it.
It was an in-joke when I was still a student with another friend of mine who we actually started it together. And he ended up working for Adidas and going off and doing his thing. And I took Middle Boop on. And it was just like a silly little in-joke. And we just thought at the time, I think there was a bit of a trend where studios had really silly names. And it was a bit of a rebellion against kind of, I suppose if you look at advertising agencies or agencies, they're usually either an acronym of someone's name or like a bold and strong word, and it's always a bit cringy. So we thought, Middle Boop, why not? It's a little in-joke.
No regrets.
Exactly. Yeah, I don't regret it for a day.
Good. Great.
Can I ask what you studied?
Yeah. So I studied in Southampton, a place on the south coast in England, and I studied a course called graphic image making, which was an amalgamation of a lot of different programs, Flash, Dreamweaver, Cinema 4D, and then of course Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, etc. But it was very broad, and I felt that course, especially some of the programs they were teaching, things like Flash, already felt quite redundant. and not something that I would take forward, especially when I loved experimenting with Photoshop and Illustrator. So I kind of rebelled a bit against the course that they were teaching and just developed my own illustrative
There seems
style.
to be a theme with rebellion.
There does, yeah. It stops there. Now everything else.
Does it? Okay.
Yeah, everything else.
Although everyone in the chat is mentioning your beard already, so I would definitely take that as a compliment. Yeah.
Yeah. By the way, I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has.
Yeah, we have
Feel
some
free
great
to-
people. It's busy in there. Sandrine, Kirsty, Jonathan, Tony Harmer is there.
Oh,
so
no,
you
Harmer.
can definitely. Oh no! Oh no! Some great, yeah, quite a lot of people on there. So just saying hi. But yeah, just carrying on with your story. Then you set up the studio solo as well, right? Or was that something that you kind of collaborated on at the beginning?
Yeah, no, I set it up completely solo. So it was at a point where I felt in my career I could set it up solo and then build it up. So actually, where we are at the moment, I don't actually employ anyone, but I work with a lot of freelancers. So the idea is we can kind of scale up to a project if needs be, if it's a bigger project, if it needs copywriters or creatives or project managers, we can do that. And then if it's just for a really cool startup that has a nice idea and probably no budget, then I can just do that as well. So it was a sort of means to being able to cater for people of all different shapes and sizes, which is creative has meant we've created some pretty cool work off of the back of it as well.
Nice. And how did you find that experience of getting started in the industry? Did you have a lot of experience before setting up the studio, or how was that?
Well, yeah. So I mean, I guess technically the new guise of Middle Boop being the last 3 years. Before that, I had sort of 7 years of working directly with clients, working in agencies. So I kind of got to know the bigger picture of how a project could run in the best way from start, from that initial engagement with a client to rolling it out, whether that was huge billboards for a global campaign or like digital ads or something like that. And I also had the experience that I guess not a lot of people who work in agencies would do, specifically in design, of working directly with clients as well, from my illustration days of whether that was an editorial piece or an album cover or whatever that was. So I guess I felt like I kind of had the full picture. And I realized that towards the end of my advertising days, I was learning a lot more from planners and account handlers and how they dealt with people and clients and ran that side of the project than I was designers and creatives. So I felt at that point, I feel like I can do this and set this studio thing up. And I kind of know what's in place if we were to take on a bigger client and manage a larger scale project, but also just working directly with someone, which might be a little bit more intense, but cool at the same time.
Yeah, a lot of learnings. Should we take a look? I think you had a couple of things to show as well, so we can get started.
Oh yeah, I'm going to show you.
You had a bit of a rebrand and a couple of things happening recently, right? They're exciting.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, so we had. I think this would be a cool place to start for the rebrand. So
yeah,
the idea was behind this. When I started the studio, I took a bit of time out and kind of worked out how best I could serve my clients, how best I could work with them. The idea was I interviewed quite a few people, and I kind of learned actually. I interviewed people who I kind of pitched work for and didn't get, and asked if they could give me some of their time as to maybe why, and so I could improve creatively that sort of proposition in the future. And I also spoke to clients who I'd worked with, and they gave me some really, really good feedback. And the idea was that some of the big key points I pulled out was to have more of a kind of value proposition of how we do things. So with that in mind, I rebranded the studio using these sort of visuals here. And I worked with a great 3D artist called Johnny Malwat, who I met at an off festival, I believe, when I was actually doing some stuff with Adobe as well. And he's really brilliantly talented guy. And what I needed to come through in these visuals was that a little bit of humor, because I think our studio is based on not taking ourselves too seriously.
Yep.
And and also just having some really cracking visuals that illustrate a few of our key kind of value propositions. And the way I built Studio was to be all about collaboration with clients, because I felt that no one really knows, if you've got an idea and you're building something, then no one really knows more about that and their audience and how they work than those guys themselves. We just need to come in and help them visualize that journey and bring it to life.
Yeah, and you're talking a lot about kind of value proposition as well. How did you kind of set up this culture and mindset for the studio and the people you work with as well?
Well, so that was exactly it. So the great thing was of doing this for so long is I've got a really good connection of creatives, friends of mine who I've worked with before, who I feel kind of fit the bill really nicely, whether they're juniors or straight out of university to people more senior. So that kind of culture, I mean, it's a hard thing to build when it's a little bit more agile, and especially at the moment when no one is able to really be there together. But the idea
pays off, right?
yeah, that's off.
Yeah.
The idea was for it to always be fun and to not get bogged down in being stressed by work or any pressures that come with tight deadlines and huge amounts of deliverables. So I'm hoping that the culture that I've started to get coming through with the guys that I work with is all about just not taking things too seriously, really, and I'm hoping that stems from the visuals and the copy on the website to everything that we kind of talk about and then develop in the studio.
Nice, yeah, making sure that's communicated from the off.
Yeah, exactly. And some of
where's the studio actually based? Is it in London? And what's happening right now with the whole situation?
Well, the studio right now is very much my living room.
Is it? Okay, nice. You just brought it home.
Yeah, I brought it home. But when we get out, there's a space in Shoreditch that I use with actually my partner's auntie, who runs a film makeup, and she's like an agent for film in makeup and hair. And I share I'm just about to, when this finishes, I'll be sharing the studio with her. So it's a really cool space that's like
nice.
It's easy for people to get to, and it's right in the heart of everything. It's right around the corner from the Adobe offices.
East Londoners.
Yeah, I lived in East London for probably about 7 years, and then when I moved north, it was like that was my one thing I wanted to hold on to, was to keep
the studio back. Or nice, an excuse to go back.
Basically, an excuse to kind of see East
I think I was an East Londoner for 6 months when I was in London, and eventually made it west, migrated.
Are you? Where are you now? Though you're not west now, are you?
No, I'm not. But I used to be a Hammersmith Chiswick kind of.
Oh wow!
Yeah, all the way back.
Yeah.
Anyways, yeah, it is. Love it.
There we go.
So who's? Sandrine is saying the part about knowing who you're dealing with as partisan agency is interesting. Having started out directly pitching to clients without the agency phase, I sometimes find I don't know who I am talking to. Some people have agency experience.
That wasn't a question.
No, it was a comment. I know, I was going, and then I was like, okay. No, some of the struggles, definitely. And it's funny because just before this, we were saying that challenges, opportunities, learnings, it's all about how you frame it, right, as well. And I think it's really interesting that you were saying you went back for feedback for clients that you didn't necessarily get on and managed to win. So that's a really open-minded way of handling it, right?
I think so. I think one of the points that I used to make in my talks was that no one's ever too good to stop learning, right? There's always something more that you can learn, and no matter how far you develop in your career, as I've discovered, is there's always more that you can learn. There's always more other ways that you can grow, and I think I've always tried to kind of keep that in the back of my mind. So it was really important when I started this phase of the studio that I think I was very aware that before I'd be creating a website or a portfolio to serve other designers and other creatives so that it looked good in the creative community. But I realized by doing that, it might not have been so easy for maybe potential clients to understand what we're all about, or just get it really quickly. So yeah, this whole process has been really interesting, and it's kind of gone to show that after launching this style, this setup, and even just talking to people, talking to friends about that this is what we're doing now and this is how we're doing it, has brought in the sort of work that we wanted to do. So it kind of goes to show that, and it's been quicker as well. I thought it might have taken maybe another year to start getting a lot more kind of startup brand work. And it happened really quickly. So it's been really cool. It's been really good to do.
And that startup world seems to be really important to you in terms of who you're working with, and what drew you to working with startups and that industry? Well,
I tell you what, I love working with people who have a vision and have something that they can start from the ground up. And also I felt that, I think from working with a lot of the big brands from all sorts of people, kind of Visa and Asda and Adidas a lot, and all sorts of people like that, you know, they've got this thing, and we're creating new ideas based around an established brand. But I felt that, especially when in advertising, you do an ad, and it'd be cool to see a poster of something that you've done on a bus or whatever. I remember my mum nearly crashed her car once when we were driving behind a bus, and there was a little poster that I'd done that was on the back of it. I went, I did
taking
that.
a photo while you're like driving.
Yeah, she's like,
safety first.
yeah, safety first, guys, always. But I felt that actually, in terms of being known for a style or a piece of work, that I wasn't really getting that credit, because it was a huge group of people that would have all created that one ad. Whereas working directly with, especially with startups, you can have a major impact on that business. And I realized, obviously, myself, from running a business and setting it up, which was a startup at some point, I knew how to do it. And things like the Weird World Cup project, where we just created a product in a couple of weeks and sold it and made money for charity. Kind of all of these little things just meant that, okay, I think I can do this, and I think I can add a lot of value to startup companies. And
something about purpose, right? And you're saying, you know, working with charity as well meant that you had a bit more meaning to what you were doing, and it gives you that drive, right, to work every day and maybe put in the hours.
Totally. It's a big thing for me, having a meaning and a purpose in the work that I do. And I felt that there was a lot more drive to do that, and there is a lot more meaning, because you see an impact every day. I mean, some of the brands that we've launched recently are now completely focused on like online testing and Facebook testing, and it's great because we're creating ads and we're putting it straight to the consumer, straight to the audience, and seeing how they react to it. And if they don't react that well to it, then cool, well, we'll change some of the copy, or we might change the visuals a little bit. And we're creating these brands that are very fluid, and are kind of doing what I've done in listening to my clients, and we've helped these guys listen to their audience, and they've been able to grow too.
Go on.
I have a few questions. Jonathan is asking if you have ever worked as a freelancer.
Oh yeah. I've done a lot of like pure freelance work, definitely.
How was that compared to running this agency?
Very different.
In a good way, or
sometimes it's good. I think the pressure's off, and I think I had quite a few years of working in agencies as a direct freelancer. I was still running Middle Boop and still doing that work, but I had time to then go in and work with these companies, and it was fantastic, a lot of it, because especially from coming out of university and just saying I want to be an illustrator, and sitting in my mum's house and creating artwork for magazines, to go in and working with a huge company and seeing how that runs was I mean, the knowledge that you grow there is great. It's brilliant. But it's a very different experience, because you have bosses and you work for teams, and it's definitely not the same as running your own thing, basically.
And how did you find it in London, in terms of making a mark in the creative industry and the kind of community there?
I loved it. It was,
Yeah.
I think, I feel like I have the benefit of being around at a time where East London was just, well, had been booming for a little while in terms of creative, but it was brilliant because we used to have things like on Brick Lane, the first Thursday of every month, they'd open up all of the galleries. There used to be some brilliant galleries up and down that road. And it'd just be this amazing group of artists and illustrators and creatives who would come together, and you'd meet people and you'd create a kind of core network, and people would be very supportive. I think there is a bit of a myth with London that it's a very kind of backstabbing culture, and, and people are all out for themselves and fighting, and there's a bit of that for sure, but there's a bit of that everywhere, right? But I found a community of people being incredibly supportive, and certainly when I was just starting out, some of the guys that I met in London and in those creative networks helped me develop and gave me some really, really good opportunities to grow further. So yeah, it's always been good to me.
It's a bit of a right time, right place thing, right?
Yeah, there was definitely a lot. I think in the early days I was definitely out a lot and meeting people, and it's really important to do that. I think when you're starting out, or when you're looking to develop, or whatever part of your career that you're in. My doorbell's about to go.
Classic working from home.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, there you go.
Maybe we can ask another question whilst this is ringing.
There are
Octavia is in our chat, our creative resident, based in the UK. She's saying, love that you pivoted from catering to other creators to focusing on what the clients want. How did you actually do that?
Well, that is a great question, and I'm glad that you loved that I did that pivot. How I did it was it was all about. There was a bit of kind of push from my side, because with clients and certainly people that I didn't end up working with, to get just a bit of time with those guys to do it. And I set up a questionnaire. Basically, we sat down and had a drink and just sort of chatted about how I could have benefited them more, what caused some of the clients that I didn't work with to go with me and why, and all of those sort of questions. And then in fact, I think a lot of it was, I posed questions like, if you were looking for another creative studio, what would that be? Like, what would you want from a studio that you don't get? And like, I got a really good bit of advice from a friend of mine who runs a cold brew coffee company called Sandals. And he said, I've always wanted almost like a menu. And right, hold on. I wanted like a sort of menu of all of the different deliverables that I could get from a creative studio. And so I created one of those. Basically, I built it down into stages, like a process of 3, with all of the different deliverables that we could offer. And then I felt that had quite a lot of value in it, because you would get kind of bespoke package. And I thought it kind of clicked with me. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, because if I was buying something like something that can be quite vague, like a creative package, I'd want to have something that felt bespoke to me. So instead of just going, cool, well, we'll give you a logo for this much, or a typeface for this much, or whatever it is, you're actually like, well, okay, this is what you want. I might advise that you do these 3 things on top of it in order to set you up for success. But yeah, I guess going back to the kind of answer, it was mostly just sitting down and getting time with clients and interviewing them, and then developing from there what those guys were saying. You know, you get Post-it notes out and have all sorts of different questions on them, and get people to, like, give people little tasks, like 30-second tasks, like, if we could have done this better, how could it have been done better, or that sort of thing. Yeah, just trying to find little gaps in kind of our services And I think it's worked really well. It seems to have done so far.
Yeah, Sandrine is loving the menu idea and the term of it. So that's nice, going down well. And everyone's starting to ask about the Weird World Cup. So let's get cracking as well with the different projects you wanted to show.
Oh yeah, sure.
Everyone's very intrigued.
Shall I whiz through the exclusive for Adobe?
Go for it.
This is just a quick thing. I wanted to give you guys something you've not seen before. So I've very, very recently put this on Behance. But so basically, despite all of the obviously the new studio setup, I still get a lot of work and inquiries about some of the more illustrative and kind of graphic projects that I guess my style is a bit more known for, and that's great because it's amazing to have this variation. And Havana came to us last year with the idea that their Havana Club 7 run, they wanted it to communicate to a new demographic and a new audience, and the Gen Z market. So we were tasked to come up with 3 different executions. Did a lot of research into the Gen Z market because I realized that does not apply to me anymore.
Any learnings you had that you want to share?
Oh, what did I learn about them? Yeah, they like music that I don't like, that's for sure. And everything seems to be about rave culture. I felt it all felt very 90s. It felt like the kind of the fashion and the aesthetic stylings seemed to be very much geared towards stuff that I would see when I was like a young kid. So I kind of get it. It always seems to work in 20
cycles.
Right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so we came up with these 3 labels. The idea was that they really needed to stand out from obviously on the shelf, but mainly in the club scenario where the Gen Z guys hang out. So we came up with 3 completely different executions, but based around that sort of Gen Z style. One being this kind of like rave poster inspired neon style with kind of big bold typography, using things. This was all pretty much created on Illustrator, these patterns using blend tools and all sorts of different tricks. This style, using Photoshop to apply the labels to the mock-ups for the bottles. So this was kind of one route. It's a more sort of ravey vibe. And then we had the first route, which was more about, I thought it'd be really cool to have a kind of foil blocked label. And they seem to go for that as well. So we would kind of emboss the type on the label, a nice bright foil. And then in the background, we'd work with some photography. This was actually all stock photography from Adobe stock. So kind of like oil paintings and water that we would then treat in Photoshop to get this effect. And we built up executions from that sort of style, really. So created out of home. I actually have a
question around this kind of ideating process and creativity from Matt, who's saying, have you ever had to do design work that you found a bit uninspiring? And how did you find your creativity back? Yeah,
that's a great question. I think there's a bit of a myth with a lot of studios where obviously you're promoting all of the best work that you've done because you want to get that work again. But I think every creative in every studio will spend the majority of their time doing work that's pretty uninspiring and pretty bland. And that's unfortunately the way it is, because a lot of the time, not all the time, but a lot of the time, that's the work that kind of pays the bills. So yeah, I've done lots of deck work, lots of, I mean, I had a freelance contract, I can't believe I'm admitting this on here, but where we would design like bills, like energy bills and letters, and you'd send these letters. I mean, they're horrible pieces of work.
Yeah, I think you do that for like a couple hours and you're already going nuts, isn't it?
Completely done. Yeah.
Yeah, and how do you bring it back, and what's kind of driving you to to find inspiration within those little projects that might not be great, right?
To be honest, there's not that much inspiration you can get from that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's almost just about doing that, but
Yeah.
you can kind of have fun with it too. You can always add your stamp onto these things, whatever it is, whether it's being a bit more clever with type. I mean, we did a flyer for Toyota recently that was pretty boring, but like we ended up doing a really nice print technique with it, so it opened in a fun way. So you can find little wins with that sort of stuff. But I think mainly throughout my career, when I've been bogged down in something that's quite dry and quite corporate, I will always find more time to then create something that's fun and engaging and kind of just for me. And I think I've been very lucky that a lot of the time in my kind of world, when I've got a lot of boring stuff on, there's always something in the background that's a lot more fun. So I can kind of balance it quite nicely. But yeah, even if there wasn't something like that and I felt kind of creatively uninspired for quite a while, then I'd usually find something to keep me going. I'll think of a new project or yeah, there's always something on the go.
Nice. Awesome.
We have a question from James. He's asking, how do you cost up a project? Do you work within the client's budget or stick to a fixed cost set by you?
Oh, that's a great one. Can I just say we're getting some good questions today? I'm very happy about this.
Details about your process. I'm very interested.
Giving it all away.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, dearie me. I'm going to be worried.
You said it's all about collaborating, so putting it out there into the world and seeing what happens.
That's true. There you go. Yeah, that's true.
Getting all these messages.
Yeah. Costing up a job is a funny one, right? Because it's so hard because every different job is completely different in terms of how they see it, what budget they might have. I mean, I've worked for some of the biggest brands in the world for a budget of absolutely no money. And I've worked for some small startup brands for a lot of money. And you can never quite tell how it's going to go. But I think in terms of costing jobs, it's really tough to kind of talk about it. I suppose when you've got a list of, first of all, you get your list of deliverables and you then ascertain from that, like we obviously have a kind of cost per deliverable that we have in our, so we can kind of pull from that. I think there is, so you can kind of build up a cost like that. I would say then you would usually enter a negotiation, which is always still quite a funny thing because I always say, like, I was negotiating a job recently and it's like, if you invited a plumber round to do like your pipes and your toilet or whatever, yeah, and they give you a quote of like $3,000, you wouldn't then go, oh, that's a bit much for me. Yeah, could you just maybe not do the toilet and do the pipes and we'll call it $1,500?
Yeah,
but like in our industry, people do that all the time. You know, oh, no, that's a bit too much for me. Yeah, I see this as being this amount. But I guess, it's a sort of culture that because we do what we do, it's a little harder to put a cost on it. And I think people sometimes just don't have the money to spend on it. But yeah, I would always say when you're costing up a job, put it to the higher amount that you would think that the job is worth, because you usually then expect a negotiation on it, and hopefully then you'll kind of get it at a point where you're both happy with it. But what else?
And we have Robert saying that I once did a little job for £50, found out later 500 would have been no problem. There's always this hindsight of being like, well, actually I could have just charged 14 for this, and the kind of undervaluing yourself, right, as well, and not quite knowing how to place that at the beginning. Just knowing there's competition out there and someone else can do it for a different price is also there.
This is a massive thing as well with the whole competition thing, because there will always be someone cheaper to do it, no matter what you charge, which is the unfortunate way. Or there'll be someone who might just need that job more, or whatever it is. So it's always hard to tell. I mean, I lost a big old job this year And I really, really felt that, I mean, it was for like one of the biggest sporting events in the world and a big brand, and they'd come together. So I'd cost it up pretty high, as you'd imagine. And I thought, well, these guys definitely have that money, and it's kind of no skin off their nose. And it didn't work because we couldn't agree on the right amount. So it's kind of, you know, if I'd have been quieter work-wise at the time, I might have lowered that more to get that work in. But because of the situation, we've been busy, I kind of felt that, well, I'm not going to undervalue this. So I kind of stuck to my guns, and it didn't work out. And, you know, I'm fine with that because we've got so much other work on. But I think it's, yeah, you know, I'm a big believer in not undervaluing yourself as a creative, because we shouldn't do, because I think the more people that take the less amount of money to do a job, then the more clients are going to believe that they can pay that in the future. And yeah, I don't know. I'm going off on a rant, but
no, that's fine.
I think it's important in the creative community to make sure that we're valued as we see that we should be.
Stuart is very fondly asking, yeah, go on, Stephanie.
No, you go ahead.
He just asked, do clients let you go nuts, or do they dictate a lot on your project?
Right. Well, clients.
Do you ever just go nuts?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I mean, at work, and it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. Well, so that's something that comes up quite a lot, and I'm sure some of the people listening will be laughing, because people will go mad, yeah. Be creative. And I think you realise, so in the early days when someone would say, yeah, go nuts, go mad, you'd be like, cool, I'm going to do this really abstract thing. You know, it's like branding like a funeral home or something, and I'm coming up with these mad visuals, like Escher stairs or something. But and obviously they're not going to buy that. So yeah, there's definitely, you can definitely go mad creatively. I think it's harder when you're working with clients, because they'll have a very specific view of what they want, and they've probably come to you knowing your work already, or knowing something that you can add to it. So, or having a vision already of what they want it to look like. So it's a lot harder to go nuts when you're working with clients. But to be honest, projects like this Havana one that I've got on here was quite good like that. We had pretty much free reign. I can show you another project where someone said go nuts, yeah, sure. And I was actually allowed to go nuts. Did this work for Adidas, this kind of social work. And so this was I'll do it quickly because I realised we want to talk about the Weird World Cup.
Yeah, definitely.
So the idea with this was they were promoting for the last World Cup all of the old football shirts that Adidas were bringing out and had brought out for various tournaments. And they had a hub called the Adidas Creators Zone. And they had all sorts of stuff going on there, live events and gigs and live art and all sorts of things. And they came to me and a few other creatives for social content, essentially, and then kind of ad work. And the idea was all about creativity being the answer. So it was a completely free brief. And
nice. It feels very relevant right now, with the creativity being the answer.
Yeah, totally, right?
People sitting at home wondering what they can do with themselves.
Yeah.
Harry is actually asking, do you have any personal projects that you're working on?
Personal projects at the moment? No, I don't have a personal project, and it's been a real gripe of mine, because I think, so I've been doing a lot of fairly more corporate kind of brand work for a little while, which has been fantastic, but it's also I feel like a little bit like drained, almost, like creatively. So I think I've been talking a lot about this to a couple of other creatives, and about the importance of, when you spend a long time doing work that's maybe not as creative as you'd like, it's really important to do personal projects to kind of keep that fire burning. And I think for a little while I was like, what is wrong? You know, I feel a little frustrated with some of the work I'm doing. And I clicked the other day, it's like, I don't have a personal project that I'm doing. We did have one. There was one in the pipeline that would have been really cool, but it's because of the circumstances going on at the moment, it's not happening. So no, I don't have a personal project right now, but I am about to start one for sure.
And I'll check in next week and make sure you're on it.
Yeah, please do.
Need to update all of it. Yeah.
Yeah, please.
Friendly reminder.
Because I'll forget, so I need someone to remind me.
Sammy is asking how you choose freelancers to collaborate with you.
Well, that's a great question. So how do I choose freelancers? A lot of the people that I work with, I've already worked with at some point or another, or are friends of mine. So I know that they'll have the right mentality and the right skill set to do the job. I do put a call out. I usually put a call out on LinkedIn as well. We get a lot of people email us. I get students email a lot and all sorts of people. So I've got kind of a list of portfolios somewhere that I'll go through. Go to events quite a lot. I'll go to DNAD events and various other, obviously I talk at events quite a lot, so I meet a lot of people there. So yeah, it's kind of a mixture of, I suppose, meeting people at events or already knowing it, that they'll be good for it. But so I guess kind of I'll hire people on a job per job basis. So for instance, with the Havana work, I worked with, most of the creative came from myself, but I worked with a friend of mine that I used to work with at Saatchi, who helped kind of build out some of the ad work purely because he's from an ad background. So I wanted someone on that to kind of help out with that. But yeah, there's all sorts of ways, really. Those are the main ones.
Should we talk a bit about the World Cup project as well, so we have time for that?
Cool, time is ticking on, isn't it?
Yeah, and we all want to know. There was a lot of questions and interest about that. So. Cool.
Well, I'll jump on. I've got a Behance. I've got a couple of other links going on. So, Weird World Cup this was a personal project, and I think it goes back to that frustration. And it was, I guess, sort of 2 years ago, coming up to. There was a frustration again that there'd been a lot of quite heavy client work that I'd be doing. I was just setting up the studio, so I was taking on a lot of, I guess, smaller projects that were very demanding, and it felt like I was at a point where I wanted to do something just for me and kind of for the greater good as well. And one of the designers that was working with me at the time, a guy called Callum Stevenson, actually, this is a good way. I met him. I was lecturing at his uni at Ravensbourne University, and he was the one guy. This is for like students who are listening. He really stood out because he really knew how to just chat as well. So he had good work, but he also he made me feel welcome when I came in to do my lecturing, and he also stayed in contact. And out of all of the people in his class, he was one of like 2 people or 3 people to keep in contact.
An extra mile.
Yeah, to go that extra mile and really show. And he came and he spoke about his portfolio to me, and I ended up getting him on some freelance work. And I think we were celebrating that project being finished when I was saying, like, I want to do something for a charity. I'm a big believer in giving my time for something that I believe in and my skill set, and hopefully adding more value than just giving some money or whatever. And the World Cup was coming up, and we were in a pub, and we were saying, there's got to be something we can do about the World Cup, and kind of get creatives involved and start engaging with the wider community, and maybe work with some cool creatives that we haven't worked with before. And we were thinking, well, we can't just do a poster. We can't just do a T-shirt, because all of this stuff's been done hundreds of times before, and it wouldn't feel that unique. And one of us had a beer mat in our hands at the time because we were watching football, and I just thought that was such a perfect kind of medium for like exhibiting your work that I hadn't seen done before, because it's synonymous with kind of retro football and pub culture. So the artwork would then connect to people on a different level that was just hanging a poster up. But also, wouldn't it be quite funny if you commissioned like some really well-known artists and people were just resting their pints on their artwork? So we had this idea. We had this idea of coming up with collaborating with artists through this way, using beer mats, coasters as the medium to do it, and that was it. We just went with it. It grew so quickly.
So how quickly were you from the pub looking at this beer mat to actually launching it?
3.5 weeks, I think, maybe 4.
Amazing. Nice,
it was honestly, it was bonkers. So the first test we did was we set a really, really loose brief. That whole go nuts thing was very much a part of this.
That moment.
Yeah, it was. And we used that as a test to see if people would be interested. And we put the email up. The idea was to engage with people from all over the world as well. So all sorts of different backgrounds and walks of life, because the World Cup in itself is about bringing people together and to celebrate this one thing. So we felt that we should be doing the same with this event, that kind of bring people together from all sorts of different influences. So we put the call out to artists from all over the world. We had some really well-known Adobe-based artists, like we'll see, who have we got here? Velvet Spectrum.
So how many artists did you work with? 20.
So we capped it at 20. We thought that was a good amount of kind of beer mats to create and artwork to direct. So we actually have more than 20 in the end, because some of the creative studios or creatives sent us like 4 designs and said, "Oh, we'll do all of them." We're like, "Cool. We can't afford to print them all, but
we'll take everyone on."
Yeah.
And how were they distributed? Was that how were people getting access to the mats?
We sold them. So what we did was, there were loads of different factors that we needed to bring into this project to make it work, and distribution was obviously a huge one. So we really wanted to kind of get a beer brand to sponsor us. So I'd spoken to a few contacts that I had in the kind of bar world, because we thought, they've got to go in pubs, right? These things. That's the whole point of them. And we spoke to a few different breweries. We managed to get contacts from Brewdog.
I love that you have contacts in the bar world. It sounds very
shady,
very dodgy. Yeah, exactly.
Probably is, to be honest. Yeah,
just a bartender down the road. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah, my contact in the bar world. Yeah, this fella.
Anyway, that worked out for you. So
yeah, we contacted Beavertown and 1 Mile End, who were 2 very different breweries, and they both offered basically to distribute these beer mats to all of the pubs that they would distribute beer to. They put them on their trucks and send them off. So Beavertown had, they've just got so many bars. We didn't have enough stock to do it. The deal didn't feel quite right. So we went with 1 Mile End. Yeah, so these things were distributed, but because we started getting so much press from this event, and we really didn't expect this to happen. So one of the reasons why the project launched so quickly was because Design Week, they interviewed me about the project, and they said, we'll post the interview in like a week and a half, whatever. We didn't have a website up at this point or anything. And they posted the interview the next day. So we had to get a website up live as quickly as we possibly could. So I think we got the website live in like 2 hours. This kind of portfolio site thing, just to enable to sell these beer mats. And I feel like, I haven't mentioned the charity as well. So this whole project wouldn't have come together if we hadn't have got charity involved. They're called Football Beyond Borders, and they were just perfect. They were so good. The idea is they use football as a way of engaging with kids from all sorts of different walks of life and kind of, I guess, poorer backgrounds, and bring them in, and they create a group, and it's all about learning, but in a more of a fun way. So it kind of using football as kind of that momentum to get the kids engaged and involved, and then they have amazing lecturers, amazing speakers, and they're running all sorts of events. They're doing some great stuff now. As schools are in lockdown, they're doing live classes. And well, basically I pitched it. This is the most nervous I was in the project, was pitching it to the head of their company. And he said, well, so let me get this straight, right? So you're doing this project with beer mats and artists, and if you earn some money from it, you'll give us that money. Right? Yeah. Yeah, cool. Yeah, why not?
Okay, great. Nice. It's always great when it goes that smoothly, right?
Oh man, it was amazing. And Adobe were amazing too, by the way. That Adobe actually sponsored this whole project. So without
It's great to see, and it really blew up, right? You got a lot of kind of attention for it, and there was some iconic moments, I think, that were also featured on there. I saw there was Zidane's headbutt and some really controversial moments kind of featuring, and it's nice that you have this playfulness that you were talking about, you know, that's kind of core to your agency as well, and making sure that that comes across with the humor and you know, tying it together.
Yeah, I thought that's quite a good point, actually. Like, it does really stem back. I mean, it always one of the real kind of sticking points that I needed to make sure that the artists got in the brief was that this thing needs to be funny. It needs to have some humour in. It can't just be kind of cliched moments from World Cups. They have to be odd moments and weird things. I mean, like this one on screen, this diet. For anyone that's old enough to remember the USA '94 World Cup, there's a scene where Diana Ross, for no reason whatsoever, is singing her song, and then there's like a huge band of people, and she goes to take a penalty and then misses the penalty, and there's this huge build up, and it's just this funny little thing. And those were the best moments, I think, that we got. Here's the Zidane headbutt. This is by Mason London, who's a very talented illustrator.
Amazing, yeah.
And
apparently I read that people were really worried about spilling their drinks on them, on the mats, and trying to save them for a little souvenir because they were so nice.
Honestly, we had to, people were emailing us going like, can we order 3 packs so that we can actually use one as a coaster, and then we can keep the rest. And we had galleries all over Europe exhibiting them. There was a guy who owns like a yacht company who bought about 100 packs of them. I have no idea what he did with them, but
just find out down the line.
Yeah,
some new currency.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, beer mat currency. But it really blew up, and I think what the importance of this that people got was that it was creatives coming together to help out a charity and help out someone that was in need, but also just to create artwork for fun, like to take your minds out of that world of kind of the heavy client work that we've been talking about, and just create something that might make people laugh. And I think because it was done in that sort of way, it wasn't just a project for the creative industries. So it kind of goes back to that point I was saying about when I was building the new website, I stopped building it so that other creatives might like it. I built it in a way, and I built the business in a way that it would hopefully render true to people that might need my work or our skill set. You know, I guess it was, you know, the same with this sort of stuff, is kind of pitching it in a way to people that it communicates outside of our creative world. And that's when it blew up, because it had that point where it engaged with football. People who like football engage with it. And we had things like my football team, Crystal Palace, the team that I support, they were tweeting about it because, well, I mean, they had no internationals, I don't think, in the World Cup, so they didn't have much to do. But it was amazing, and we had, I mean, there were celebrities that were buying them, which was crazy, and artists, and it was pretty cool. And we had, I don't know if I can show, like we had The Guardian posted about it. We got some press on there, and it went on TV. And I think what is, and especially right now with everything that's going on, the importance of creatives coming together and creating something for the greater good, that maybe people might have some more time right now, or whatever it is. I think it feels very relevant to what we're doing at the moment, what we're going through. And yeah, we really did not expect this project to kind of grow the way it did so quickly, and to engage with so many people and all over the world. I mean, we ended up selling pretty much, I think we printed 6,000 packs of beer mats, and they all, apart from a bag I found when we moved.
You said that last week, that you found a magical bag.
Yeah, it's just a magical bag of beer mats. Yeah, so if anyone wants some, they're still for sale. Yeah, apart from that, they all sold out, and they sold all over the world. We sold beer mats in Brazil, Australia, all over America and Europe. It was crazy. So yeah, I guess it kind of goes to show that, I mean, we spent a lot of time on it. It didn't just blow up overnight. There was a few clients that might not have been so happy because things were taking longer. And Callum, the other guy who was working on this, actually ended up quitting his job because his employer, they weren't supportive of this. In fact, they were the only people throughout this whole process, everyone involved in this project, they were the only people that weren't supportive. So he quit his job and focused on this, and being a young creative that he is, this really enabled him to build his career off the back of it.
Yeah, some risk taking as well, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of committing to what you care about in the end of the day.
Well, this is it. I think it's so easy in this day and age to just not spend enough time on something, like you say, that you really care about, and or to develop an idea that you think actually might become something. And I think it's so important as creatives to make sure that we, even if we do it at the weekend a bit or in the evenings, just create something that matters more to you. Now more so than ever, I should imagine, with everything going on.
We have a question from Dorina. She's asking, how would you know what approximate price to give by just comparing the quality of work of fellow artists?
Well, you've got to value yourself, and I don't think it's about comparison, because you'd be surprised at what some people charge and what some people don't charge. It's not about kind of comparing your artwork to other artworks. It's about how you feel you're valued, and your situation might be different to someone else's. So you might be living in an area that rent is cheaper or mortgages are cheaper or whatever, and you might not have so many overheads. You might not have a studio, so you can afford maybe to charge a little less to get that project because you don't have that. Whereas, you know, a bigger studio in London that has rent to pay, all sorts of things, bills to pay, like wages, would obviously have to charge more for that. You get more for it as well. So I just, yeah, it's all about how much you value yourself and how much you believe you're worth, and ensuring that you charge that and you don't undersell yourself and don't undervalue yourself.
And we also had someone make a comment earlier on about connecting with other creatives and trying to find ways to do that. How do you still do it today? And you know, you mentioned sometimes events and doing talks, but how do you still get involved in the creative community, especially right now with, you know, the whole circumstances?
Well, I mean, right now obviously there's always been a great online creative community anyway, and throughout the years I've met people who have I've just had almost like a kind of online, I've spoken to them online for years, but we never met in real life, and people who've like been a fan of my work or whatever, who've just interacted with me in some way. So there's always that. We have the benefit of having a great industry and supportive industry for people. So there's, I mean, Twitter, Instagram, all of that sort of stuff. I think usually whoever it is you want to talk to will probably be pretty fine with talking to you back. So in the early days, when I had no contacts and no means of connecting with people, I did zines. I used to print zines, and what I would do was commission artists that I really loved to design a double-page spread of the zine, and we'd interview the artists as well, and that meant I got to meet a lot of my kind of earlier modern design heroes, I suppose. So there's all that, and like you say, events. There's so many amazing events. I mean, I feel very fortunate to have spoken at a lot of them now, and that's a brilliant way of meeting people. Like Design in Daba, Off. There's loads. I mean, Adobe do great work with a lot of events as well, and the It's Nice That events that they do. They're perfect events for meeting people. DNAD run their festival in London. That's a great way of meeting people in the community. It's changed, definitely, because, yeah, like I say, 12 years ago I was printing zines and going down Brick Lane to meet people at galleries. And I feel that whole side of things is not really a thing anymore. But now we have Twitter and all sorts of bigger social events. So yeah, there's loads of ways of meeting people.
We have pretty much come up to time. So thank you all in the chat for joining us. We are here every day, Monday to Friday from 12 to 1 in the UK with UK artists during these weird times to keep you entertained. Is there anything you would like to say as a last word to our community, Gordon?
I just say thanks for spending your time on listening to me waffling on for the last hour. And I would say, yeah, I guess as a kind of a summary of everything I've been talking about, it's that right now is a pretty decent time to be doing something a little bit more creative, maybe collaborative with people for maybe a greater good. So if you had an idea that you might have been thinking about, now's the time to do it, really, and get out there and push it, because like with the Weird World Cup, you never know what the public will react to and how they'll react to it. So yeah.
Thank you very much, Gordon, for being our guest. And of course, thank you, Emma, our new community manager, for co-hosting this with me. And we will be back tomorrow at noon. So hope you all have a great rest of your day. Thank you very much for watching. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.